we start the program now, I would like to invite Miss Sonali Pandit ji for Saraswati Vandana to begin with. Sonali Pandit ji.
Namaskar.
To everyone else, I would request to mute their video and audio. Miss Sonali Pandit.
नमस्कार सभी को। या कुंदेन्दु तुषारहार
वीडियो बंद है, वीडियो चल।
या शुभ्रवस्त्रावृता या वीणावरदण्डमण्डितकरा या श्वेतपद्मासना या ब्रह्माच्युतशङ्करप्रकृतिभिः देवैः सदा वन्दिता सा मां पातु सरस्वती भगवती निःशेषजाड्यापहा शुक्लां ब्रह्मविचारसारपरमाम् आद्यां जगद्व्यापिनीं वीणापुस्तकधारिणीम् अभयदां जाड्यान्धकारापहाम् हस्ते स्फटिकमालिकां विदधती पद्मासने संस्थितां वन्दे तां परमेश्वरीं भगवतीं बुद्धिप्रदां शारदां
Dhanyavad Sonali ji, thank you so much. Can everyone hear me? Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yes,
Good.
yes.
Yes.
Good.
Well, good morning, namaskar, and welcome to yet another pleasant morning of Saturday. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation and being present here. Let me assure you, you are going to have an enlightening session to enjoy the wisdom. Well, this is Gyanendra Mishra, General Secretary of VAK, that is Vishwadhan Kendra, Center for International Studies. I would like to introduce Vishwadhan Kendra before we move forward. Vishwadhan Kendra is a registered non-government, non-profit organization with an objective to serve as a platform that airs views on national and international events or incidences, keeping India's best interest in mind, understands, assesses, and tries to form Indian-centric point of view and findings and thoughts on our tagline Kritno Yantu Vishwatah, Arthat, let the noble thought come to us from all sides, and that sums it up all for us. VAK also serves as a forum for understanding the various cultures and traditions around the world and promotes research on studies on them. Well, now, as you are aware, Vishwadhan Kendra VAK is running an online series named Walk the Talk, VAK the Talk. The subject is Refugees, a Universal Challenge. It is a 6-chapter series, and every chapter contains various aspects of challenges worldwide due to refugees, forced migration, and after successful completion of 4 chapters, we are here today at chapter 5. Where we are going to be enlightened about extremely critical, important concerns, refugees leading to terrorism, both physical and cultural, and also leading to lack of opportunities, employment, unrest, and inequality in host nation. So joining us on the panel today is Dr. Gobardhan Das, a professor with the Special Center for Molecular Medical Medicines at JNU, a well-known speaker and a socially enlightened media personality. He speaks on various current affairs subjects. But the point to note here is that he himself has been a victim, a first-generation victim and part of refugee phenomena, and had to migrate from Bangladesh, but now is well settled in Bharat. So we will have first-hand account of information with Dr. Gobardhan Das. And with him we have a name that hardly needs an introduction. If you monitor news and views on refugees, especially on Kashmir and around, a land that has seen exodus of Hindus, but also seen peaceful, quiet settlement of Bangladeshi Rohingyas. He is none other than Shri Sushil Pandit, इस मुद्दे पर पैनी नजर रखते हैं वो रिफ्यूजीज पे, स्पेशली कश्मीर पे, and he can always enlighten us with real-time data as well. So we have speakers who are passionately and emotionally connected to the subject. Refugees, a universal challenge, both having vast knowledge on topic, and we are here to listen to them. Session is to be moderated, not as usual, by Dr. Shakti Prasad ji this time. And we have a very senior social activist, a team member who has been passionately involved in education and social field in overseas for last about 27 years, Shri Prabhakar Tijari ji. So he'll be handling the session. So, well, I'm sure you're looking forward to listen to our distinguished speakers. So I'll not be taking any more of your time, and will hand over the rein to our good friend, a senior member, Prabhakar Tijari ji, who will be moderating or handling this wonderful session for all of us. Wish to thank and welcome our distinguished guest, and of course to all of you again. Have a wonderful session and a great day. Over to Prabhakar ji. Thank you. Namaskar.
Namaste and thank you, Gyanendra ji. Namaste and good morning, Suprabhatam, to all the viewers and guests who are present on this occasion. I am fortunate and blessed to get this opportunity to moderate the session. You all know all other sessions and entire series is being moderated by Dr. Shakti from the Jawaharlal Nehru University. But unfortunately, he has to miss today's session because of some personal commitment. So I am there. Thank you again, management of Vishwadhan Kendra, to give me this opportunity. Today we are here to talk on this episode number 5 of our 6-episode series on the topic of refugee, a universal phenomena. We have conducted, we have initiated this 6 series discussion on the refugee on 27th of October 2021 with our chapter 1, which was on history of refugee, its universality. Then our speaker dwelt on the chapter number 2. The subject which we kept was the destination of refugees, whether they are natural or deliberate, because there is always a sense that special efforts are being put by the many refugees to go and settle in place of their choice. Then we came on chapter 3, where we discussed on the psychological aspect of the refugees. Nonetheless, we know they are totally under stress because of migrating their own land. So we dealt on that psychological journey of the refugee, as well as we have also discussed on the phenomena why the Muslims are being majority of the refugees. Is there any phenomena or it is just natural? Then on the chapter 4, on the 7th of May, before this chapter, we deliberate on the refugees, the victim of conflicts, but are they themselves become the cause of social conflict in the host nation? That aspect is being come out very, very profoundly nowadays. So in all our last episodes, we discussed from the history of the refugees, their psychological aspect, their intent of getting settled, as well as their whether they are the source of conflicts in the host nation. Now, as we all aware, the world has recognized that the refugee is not a simple problem. It is a multi-dimensional problem. Initially, might be we were all thinking from the human-centric point of view, that those who have been forced to leave from their native place needs to be settled. But over a period of time, multiple dimensions have emerged, because human being is not a machine. It is a living being, and they do not come as it is. They come with the baggages. And when they settle in the host countries, they start opening their baggages. And that is where the problem starts. And we may be finding that the dimension can be to the extent of participating or using their situation for the terrorist activities. So that is why we will be discussing on this aspect in this episode number 5. But we all aware that this aspect has been well recognized by United Nations also. And now they are talking about identifying the sustainable solution to the refugee problem. Initially, they may be forcing the wealthy nations to forcefully take the refugees, but now they are simply talking about the sustainable solutions. And that is the reason we find the world is now talking about settling these refugees in the third countries, because they themselves are finding now it is difficult to cope up with the problem. And with this background, we are today on the chapter number 5. As we all aware, the title of the chapter is Refugee Leading to Terrorism. We are not saying they are part of that, but we say that because of their situation, hopeless situation, many of them may be finding, and that may be the lucrative situation for the terrorist organization to take their help. That is why this dimension we are discussing, refugee leading to terrorism, physical or cultural. Because we observe that there is a non-compatibility on the religion and culture between the host nation as well as the refugees. So that non-compatibility of the cultural aspect is creating a lot of problem between the refugees and the host society. So that is the another dimension of today's talk, that whether they are the reason for unemployment, unrest, and inequality in the host nation. So with this little background, we will be initiating today's discussion on the chapter number 5. We all know we have two eminent speakers on today's discussion. As it has been discussed, Shri Sushil Pandit, he is well known in the field of taking up the course of refugees plight, because he himself is living like a refugee in his own country, in his own motherland. So that aspect also was not being taken care, and which we dwelt on our initial discussion, the aspect of the refugees not migrating from to another country, but they are the refugees in their own country. That aspect must be come out in this sort of discussion. So Sushil ji, of course, is living the life of refugee in his own motherland. So welcome, Sushil ji. Similarly, we have another guest, Gobardhan Das ji. As discussed, he himself migrated from the Bangladesh because of the situation which all of us we know. So before I invite our first guest, Sushil Pandit ji, I would like to just inform that this session will run in 2 parts. Part 1, we will be giving 20 to 25 minutes to each speaker to dwell and express their thoughts on the subject. And then second part will be question and answer session. And during the concluding part of Q&A session, speakers can conclude their thought in the last 5 minutes. So that that is how we will be completing this session in around 70 minutes, 75 minutes. So I will not take much of your time. Now let me invite Sushil ji to enlighten us with his vast experience. You are mute, Sushil. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tiwari ji, and thank you, Vishwadhyan Kendra, for inviting me over to this session. May I first request, do you expect me to speak in English or in Hindi? What is your preferred mode of communication here?
Both is fine, sir. Both you
Sir,
can.
आपका comfort. We are
Both.
fine with either.
Because all the proceedings so far have been in English, and the invitation and the poster, etc., also is in English. I thought probably it is English that you prefer. So I'll stick to that.
तो हिंदी का प्रयोग कर सकते हैं सर, आप जैसा चाहें, पूर्ण रूप से।
मैं बहुत खुशी से, मुझे प्रसन्नता होगी, मैं हिंदी में भी बोलूंगा। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
आप दोनों भाषा में बोलिए, so that जिसको हिंदी नहीं समझेंगे साउथ पार्ट से, they may also understand in between. So
जी, refugees leading to terrorism. आज हम इस विषय पर जब विमर्श कर रहे हैं, there is a context. Yesterday, 2 judges of Supreme Court have held Nupur Sharma directly responsible for the brutal murder of an innocent tailor called Kanhaiya Lal in Udaipur. This is the backdrop. This is really the context of the times we are living in, and also connects very well with the subject under our consideration. Before I get into the views, the interpretations, the inferences and opinions, let me give you 3 specific examples of refugees in the last more than half a century. In the 50s, large number of hundreds of thousands of Tibetans moved south to India because Chinese overran their country, subjugated them, and under the leadership of Dalai Lama, they became refugees. And once they entered India, lots of them settled here, they still live here, but almost as many spread all over the world, especially in the Western world. Till date, I am yet to hear about a single act of terror committed by these Tibetans. Even if you say that if a terrorist finds himself in an alien culture which has no similarities with his own cultural background, Tibetans are aliens anywhere outside Tibet. The way they dress, the way they look, their language, their lifestyle, their belief. Probably people who can be cited from a long distance as unique and special. I'll give you the second example. 20 years later, in the 70s, East Africans were driven out from Uganda primarily, but also Kenya and Tanzania. These hapless refugees of Indian origin, I don't know how many know, were refused entry into India. They were Indians, and Mrs. Gandhi decided not to let them into their own mother country. Most of them settled in United Kingdom because East African nations of Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania were erstwhile British colonies. I am yet to find a single East African Indian to have committed an act of terror. They also were in completely alien circumstances, completely uprooted, had a great sense of grievance. I'll give you the third example of my own community in the 90s who were driven out of Kashmir. I must tell you, some of my brothers and sisters and their mothers and their old parents hadn't stepped out of Kashmir in their lifetime. Some of the old women hadn't stepped out of their villages. They hadn't seen a highway or a train in their life. They hadn't worn clothes which were not warm in generations. When they were thrown out without a roof on their head or security of a meal, I am yet to find a single example of terror committed by this group of Kashmiri Hindus, who are, as you rightly described, refugees in their own country, which is a tragic distinction we carry with us. So where are these untested premises and theories coming from? That refugees lead to terrorism. Where is this compulsion to lie, to distort, and to confuse? Why are we fabricating these incredible concepts when terrorism stares us in the face? Whose compulsion is it? And sadly, I conclude that this is an ingrained hypocrisy that has seeped into our bone marrow, that forces us to look for alibis and pretexts and not the real reason that we can see. Since we are talking about terrorism, I must remind all of us that even United Nations, after decades of breaking their head, have not yet defined what terrorism means or what it constitutes. There is no definition of terrorism yet. Like that famous American judge who said, I cannot define obscenity, but I know it when I see it. Terrorism also has become a phenomenon thanks to this hypocrisy that we cannot define it, but we know it when we see it. Why can't we define terrorism? Because we are wedded to parroting lines like terrorism has no religion and terrorist has no faith, and that all religions are equal, and that no religious text advocates violence against the innocent. We are wedded to parroting these lines. And as if these lines were not enough, we have added a lot more to this hypocritic mumbo jumbo at the very highest level. And let me sample some of these lines to you. The sample is, everyone living in this country is Hindu. I have often heard this line in the recent past. Everyone living in this country is a Hindu. Another line. Everyone in this country has a common DNA. What does that imply? In Mahabharata, forget DNA, Pandavas and Kauravas were from the same kula. But when we float this DNA theory, what are we trying to imply? And then another line. They have not changed their ancestors. They have changed only their method of prayers. What are you trying to imply? For the basic question, can anyone change his ancestors? Can you? Can I change my ancestors even if I hate them a lot? I cannot. I cannot travel back in time and choose a different set of grandparents or great-grandparents. It is an impossibility. So what are you crediting anyone for that they have not changed their ancestors? They have changed what they could change, and they denounce and they humiliate and they insult those ancestors who they cannot change. But when we float this line, what are we trying to imply is the question. Another one. Hindutva is incomplete without Islam. This is another perversity that has been inflicted in not too distant past. I have seen a further improvement on this mumbo jumbo when very recently I heard that the struggle for Ram Janmabhoomi was imposed on us and is actually contrary to our mool pravrti, our basic nature. This is what I heard very recently. I am amazed at our capacity to bring about these notions and plant them in the heads of people, expecting that people will buy, people will believe. Why do we invent these lies, these fabrications? What is it that drives us towards this behavior? I believe it's a old malaise. And let me give you an example. When India was partitioned, there was a Congress perspective. And that perspective was that British were the main culprit. Their practice of divide and rule caused the partition. And they are the ones who engineered the split of our motherland. This was the line parroted by leader after leader and in the textbooks. Then emerged the non-Congress line on partition. And if you read the books of Ram Manohar Lohia or even H.V. Sheshadri on tragic story of partition, the line there is that Congress is responsible for partition. They are the ones who accepted and agreed to divide India. These old men were in a hurry to gain power. They had no patience. They, in their pursuit of personal glory and power, agreed to partition. Now, I'm not saying that British are not responsible or Congress had no role to play in this. But in both these theories running parallel, you know who escapes the blame is Islamic separatism, jihad, the Muslim mindset, Muslim League, Jinnah. Indeed, some of our foremost leaders acquitted Jinnah of all wrongdoing, called him a great secular leader, went to his mazar and paid obeisance, went to Minar-e-Pakistan and paid tributes. No, this hypocrisy came decades before the examples of hypocrisy I just gave you. Why do we not see the truth when it is literally a writing on the wall? Why do we prevaricate? Why do we invent lies? Even right now, on Kanhaiya Lal's murder, the theory that is being parroted is Pakistan is responsible for it. Everything was done from Pakistan. We are unwilling to acknowledge a thriving Pakistan within here, amongst us. We keep pointing to the Pakistan across the border. The thriving Pakistan within has a common DNA with us, has common ancestry with us, is incomplete unless it is added to Hindutva. Hindutva is incomplete. Now, it is this hypocrisy, this tendency to lie and lie brazenly, that I feel gets permeated when you blame refugees squarely. I'm not saying refugees do not commit terrorism, but do they commit terrorism because they are refugees? It is like saying the 9/11 was caused by Wright brothers because they invented the aeroplane. I mean, nothing can be more ridiculous than that. I've given you examples after examples where refugees have not committed a single act of terror. If there are such humongous exceptions, where is the need to propound this theory that refugees commit terror? Terror flows from a belief system. Terror flows from a certain article of faith, a certain theology. Terror flows from justification of violence to achieve political ends. Non-refugees do it more than refugees. Is Lashkar-e-Taiba a refugee organization? Is Jaish-e-Mohammed a refugee organization? Are they looking for refugees in Pakistan to come here and fight us? What are we trying to propound? Is Al-Qaeda a refugee organization? Is ISIS a refugee organization? Is Al-Shabaab a refugee organization? Is Boko Haram a refugee organization? Are they look for refugees to go and blow themselves up? So where are we getting these ideas from? Why do we propound these theories? Because we cannot summon the courage to speak the truth. And every time we prevaricate, we hunt for alibis. Every time we hunt for lies that can stick as some kind of rationalization for terror, we will end up with these theories. And on every such occasion, it is our duty to puncture these balloons. It is our duty to blow such myths away. And we would be failing in our duty as citizens, as thinking citizens, as people committed to civilizational values of peace, amity, coexistence, divinity in every creation, animate or inanimate. We would be failing in our duty to uphold these values. So I completely reject this preposterous proposition that it is refugees who lead to terrorism. Thank you so much for giving me this time. I have taken my 20 minutes. I hope I have spared a minute or two for other speakers to dwell on this. And I am grateful again for affording me this opportunity and allowing me my piece of opinion on this matter to you and your audience. Namaskar.
Namaste. Thank you, Sushil ji. You brought the new thought process to connect a refugee with terrorism, because people are often generalize everything, because it is very easy to generalize if they do not find the particular response to the particular act. So thank you very much. Really, audience will be really thinking on this line. how to distinguish the act of terrorism and the nature of refugees. So thank you again. Now may I invite Dr. Gobardhan Das ji to dwell on this subject. Maybe another part of that subject is whether the refugee situation is responsible for unemployment, inequality, and the unrest in the host country. So these both the aspects we will be dwelling together. Mr. Gobardhan Das ji, thank you.
Good morning, Shuprabhat, and I see many dignitaries present here today. And in fact, I'm a science student, so my facts may not be correct all the way. And if there is a mistake, please correct me. And in advance, I apologize. And it's indeed a privilege to share it, dais with Shri Sushil Pandit ji. I admire him actually in several times. My good colleague, good friend Anand, I asked him to introduce with him because we do share similar backgrounds. And Sushil ji, correctly, he himself and you also mentioned that he is a refugee, is in homeland. Indeed, if you look in my background, I'm also born in a refugee family, rather from the east in Bangladesh. In around 1947 or in Noakhali in 1946, Noakhali riot, you may all aware of it. And in 1947, my father at the age of 6, and what he witnessed, the execution of several family members. And at the age of 6, he came to inland India, and he started working in somebody's house as he's grazing cattle, and that is our family. And my mother actually born in a refugee camp, and then they started a family, and then we are here today. So basically, if you look at in history, the refugee and the terrorism, invaders, these are all concomitant words. They all go together. And in case of Sushil ji and the 5 lakhs other Hindu Kashmiris, they are actually the refugees in their homeland. Sushil ji actually took a long time to establish the saying that there is no link between the terrorism and the refugees. I would like to point a little bit, explain a little bit more. Probably I majorly agree with him, but at the same time, 2 things I would like to rather correct in the sense that it actually depends from where the terrorism is coming, from where the refugees are coming. In refugees, in many cases in India, are actually contributing to the nation building and contributing the growth of the nation. If you go to Bengal, it uses eminent personalities. That includes the Rabindranath Tagore, that includes many, Professor Satyajit Ray, and many others. They're coming from the east side of Bengal. In east side of Bengal, actually they are the one. If you look at many scientists, the prominent personalities in Bengal, they are hugely contributing to the growth of this country. If you look at once again, if we consider that 5 lakh, the Kashmiri Hindus are refugees, I consider them, they're the Jews of India. They're the most brilliant crowd in India. And this, being a scientist, I associate with many of the Kashmiri Hindus, like Professor M.K. Van, Professor Sudhir Sapuri, Professor Anil Kaul, Professor Vijay Kuchru. They are the most eminent scientists and academicians within this land. So even if if we consider them refugees, they are not, forget about the contributing to terrorism, they are actually contributing to the nation buildings. If you look back at the history, if you look at the Parasha in Persians, look at Tatars, look at Godrej, look at the Jahangir Baba, they had to leave their country and they come to India. They are the one actually are shaping and shaped Indian culture, Indian economy. So often the refugees, many cases in the refugees, they are actually contributing for the nation building. They are contributing the land where they are being adopted. They are one actually contributing to the growth of their in the adopted land. If I come back to the few things Sushilji tried to was telling us, like a common DNA. Yes, in India, if you look at, we have the majority of, if you look at all the DNA sequence, being a scientist, I know DNA being sequenced. Our origin is the same. But why some of us rather, our history is tens of thousands years old history. If we are coming from the common ancestors, we all are Hindus. True. That is true. But sometime how and when we diverged in the way, in our way of of prayers. This is it, nobody on this earth, nobody actually by willingly they can dump their own religion or own way of praying. So if you look at history, this is conversion is also the very painful conversion. In Kashmir, if it's 1991, Sushilji was telling what was the Nara going on? Nara going on. They are saying that the male Kashmiris, male Hindus, they leave and they want to either convert or leave the valley. So basically that way, if you look at in history, the Hindus have been converted, forcibly converted. Well, so that some of us had to, this way or that way, they had to convert to the other religion. So basically, in spite of the common DNA, we have shared the same ancestor. Their method been diverged because of various reasons, including the conversions, maybe forced conversion. So going back to the story once again. So that is the one thing I said. This basically is not that the refugees are actually are committing a terrorism, but rather they are actually contributing for the growth of the country, the host country. If on the other hand, it's a kind of case specific, origin specific. If you look at current situation in Germany, Germany accepted the 1 million of refugees. In 5 years, their terrorism index grown up 19.7%. If I come back, similarly, if you look at in Sweden, the terrorism gone up 350%. So that means the refugees, nature of the refugees, and the origin of the refugees actually is important. It's not that all refugees are terrorists, they commit terrorism. All refugees are equal. It's just specific to some refugees who are really are commit terrorism, and some refugees like in the refugees from Bangladesh and refugees from Persia, that kind of refugees, they contribute to their host land. So if I come back again about these Rohingyas, if you look at the background of Rohingyas, they are they commit huge kind of terrorism. I expect what we feel, what we afraid, the Rohingyas are not accepted any other neighboring countries, but somehow that Rohingyas made the path to come to a place like in Jammu and Kashmir. The 40,000 Rohingyas are in Jammu and in Kashmir. By their nature, I think the Kashmiri Pandits, Kashmiri Hindus are not been allowed to go back to their homeland, but at the same time, somehow Rohingyas made their path to go or grab those lands. Those who is going, once again, we are afraid those kind of the refugees, and they actually moving, displacing the citizens of India. If you look at the current situation in West Bengal, West Bengal is the next Kashmir. If you look at, there is no right now, there is no opportunity for job. All industries are closed. Indian industries is finished, and the 500 years Bengali cultures, the cultures is not slowly being destroyed. And if you look at Bengalis now, they are working in various cities and various other states. Slowly Bengalis are being displaced, and this place is being grabbed by the invaders, right? The so-called Bangladeshi refugees, and their culture is being destroyed. And if you look at these cultures slowly being diffused, like in Persia, although they are contributing to in India or in anywhere else, their cultures, their cultures are completely destroyed. Nothing called Persian culture anymore. This is the place is Iran. So similarly, I'm afraid that Bengali cultures are also slowly being destroyed, and in coming future, we won't leave any kind of that so-called the enriched Bengali culture. So similarly, so therefore, what I feel, what I think, we have to be, come forward. We have to be united. We have to show our togetherness to preserve our own culture, and preserve our heritage. If you look at, once again, if I can give a couple of examples in what happened in Pakistan, what happened in the Buddhist culture, the Buddhist temples, our Indian temples are being destroyed. So basically, if the specific of some kind of nature of the refugees, nature of the invaders, so basically sometimes the refugees become invaders. That invaders actually try to destroy your culture, destroy your heritage. So that we should aware of, and we should know of, and how we prevent is a collective our effort. We have to contribute. We have to be we share our thoughts, and we have to come up some kind of strategies so that we can preserve our religion, preserve our culture, our heritage. So I'm really nervous talking in front of all the dignitaries, especially Sushilji. Although I wanted to talk a little bit more, but I think my time is almost over. So I'm ending here, but if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you, Gobardhan Das ji, for sharing this your experience and your thought. Now, see, the audience or a general mass is carried away very fast. So the earlier definition that all migrants are refugees, but all refugees are migrant, but all migrants are not refugees. But when we have seen to become a refugee, you don't have to migrate. For example, what happened in Kashmir, what happened in the American continent, where the original citizen of that land are living the life of refugee. They don't migrate. But those who have migrated there, they are so forceful that original people are under the threat of the migrants. So there are a lot of multiple dimensions to these issues. So that is the reason this is not very simple. And I do not think that worldwide there is a data to say concrete, this is the phenomena. Like Sushil ji said, there is no definition of terrorism. So we do not find a concrete data. But deliberation on this topic from the multiple dimension can really enlighten the people or the societies who are under threat. As it was said, that it is not the refugees who are involved in the terrorist activities, but to the contrary, it is the religious and cultural belief of the people. They may not be migrants, they may not be refugees, that lead to that act of terrorism. So when we link these phenomena of terrorism and refugees, we need to incorporate a lot of dimension into that, and that can come out only by deliberation from different aspect of these two phenomena. Similarly, another aspect is being raised, that the host nations, because of the economic problem and the scarcity of the resources, had there not been a refugees, might be the host nation would have been comfortable. Is it a reality or is it a myth? If the refugees are outsiders, they are contributing to the economy. We have seen the Parsi community. They have contributed to the economy and the generation of the employment. So how can we say that the refugees are taking away the jobs of the host nation? So these phenomena, whether the refugees are from contributor to the problem creator, whether the refugee need to be migrant or not migrant. So these are the lot of conflicting scenarios we are finding. And I do not think in India we have a lot of data, though we are under the threat. See, as it was said, because of the Rohingyas, they are instrumental in converting them into a terrorist people. But this cannot be a phenomena, because we have the another set of people who became refugee but become contributor. So as it was said, the society must build a courage to say spade is spade. But the society will always pay the price, common man. So with this, I think we can start our second part of the today's deliberation. Some question has come, and I can take the question which has been now being addressed. So let us have two questions to Sushil ji. The question has come as, is India the victim of refugee phenomena? And second question to that is, why do you think the concern about the refugees are neglected by politicians? Are they helpless and cannot do anything? So you can give insight to these two questions, then we will go ahead. Shri Sushil ji.
Thank you, Tijareji. When you talk about India and refugees, let's remind ourselves, India has yet to sign the United Nations Convention on Refugees or even internally displaced people. We do not have a declared refugee policy as a nation. Do you believe that? Do you understand where we are coming from? As a country, we never tire of announcing to the world that we have given refuge to everyone from across the world. And that this has been the most favorite destination of refugees. But we neither have a refugee policy, a formal, authorized, declared refugee policy, nor have we signed the UN Convention on Refugees. So this is kept flexible at the whims and fancies of the government of the day. I will never forget this assertion by a 75-year-old or perhaps older gentleman who is a lord in the Parliament of United Kingdom, a man of East African origin, a Gujarati, who told me, Mr. Pandit, India for me is like a mother. But when this mother refused to give me entry back, when East Africa was driving us out, all my illusions were shattered. I'll never forget how this mother treated me like some kind of, a stepson, a stepchild. This happens because we have not formally given ourselves a refugee policy which governments will have to adhere to, which we can invoke in the courts of India and agitate our right as a refugee. Forget that. On 12th of December 2019, Parliament of India created a legislation called Citizenship Amendment Act, where it fast-tracked the application of refuge seekers from Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. The Hindu, Sikh, Baudh, Jain refugees, Parsi refugees, were given only 5 years of wait as opposed to 11 years for everyone else. That was the only concession given. Do you know, till date, after this law has entered our statute books, the government of the day has not framed the rules. And consequently, not a single refugee, not a single Hindu, Sikh refugee, or Christian refugee, or Jain or Baudh refugee has been granted citizenship. It is more than 2.5 years. So even when we have a policy, even when we have a law passed by the parliament and approved by the president, look at the hypocrisy. Look at the pressure this government feels by the phenomenon called Shaheen Bagh. Look at how thin, how superficial that commitment was. So, as far as India is concerned, our record is shameful, to say the least. We have abandoned our own people. Hindus and Sikhs in erstwhile Pakistan, whether it was West Pakistan or East Pakistan, the Buddhists did not ask for partition. They were left behind against their choice. They didn't have wherewithal. They didn't have means. They didn't have even awareness. And as if that was not enough, we created a pact called Nehru Liaquat Pact, where we left them as hostages in hostile territories in the hands of jihad. And today, they face total annihilation. There is a genocide of Hindus in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, in Bangladesh. This is the shameful record of Indian state and successive Indian governments. You talk about what refugee policy we have, what empathy we have for refugees. There have been several prime ministers, maybe 11 prime ministers since Kashmiri Hindus were driven out of Kashmir Valley. Not one prime minister till date has visited a refugee camp of Kashmiri Hindus. Not even one. They come to Jammu. They conduct public meetings. They go for, cutting ribbons and laying foundation stones. They don't pay a visit to the refugee camp to put some balm on their festering wounds, even after 32 years of living as refugees. Irrespective of ideology, irrespective of party, irrespective of coalition, irrespective of who the prime minister is, this has been the apathy, the indifference, the criminal neglect of Indian state towards its own people. They have been abandoned. And as if to get rid of this responsibility to reverse their migration, they call us migrants, we are pushed back into Kashmir, exploiting our destitution, economic destitution. They push us back like slaves and hostages to be killed at will by jihad in Kashmir. This is our treatment of our governments, of the refugees who are our own people, who fled for their lives, leaving everything behind. So if you ask me what has been our record, what has been our policy, this is our record. This is our policy, irrespective of the government and the leaders who lead these governments. I hope I have been able to answer your question.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you, Ji. There was a question for Gobardhan Das Ji. See, you are being the refugee in India and contributing to the nation building. Can you say all refugees are contributor, or you are the only exception to that? That was the question raised. And the second to that, you can reply is the cultural terrorism is real or it is only a myth?
Well, anyway, so I'll answer this question in two different parts. See, I clearly mentioned that refugees, it depends on the type of refugees and the origin of the refugees. So all the refugees are not really terrorists. At the same time, some of the refugees are in fact contributing and shaping the culture of the adopted land. So basically, once again, the emphasize just to say all the refugees are not terrorists, or they are rather some of the refugees are contributing to the development or creating the jobs and creating the growth of the country. The examples are numerous. If you look at every second Bengalis, eminent Bengalis, those who contributed for this growth of this land are probably coming from the Bengali refugees. And also, I took the examples of Russia, that they are contributing economically, they are they're creating jobs and the growth of this nation. So that part of answer of one question. The other part, am I the one? No, absolutely not. There are hundreds and thousands of refugees. They are coming from various countries. They are contributing for the development of the growth of the country. So I'm not the only one, and I'm really very, very in that respect very small. No. So and what was the other question?
That whether cultural terrorism is
Cultural,
real or
yes. In cultural, see, in if I take the example of Bengal, the cultural, we are rather, I think, in some cases, is contributing, the shaping the new culture and the improving the culture. In some other cases, if you look at Afghanistan, the Buddhist culture completely destroyed. Once again, it depends on the nature of the refugees, nature of the terrorists, to what they do and why, how they do. So basically, once again, it's not the refugees specific. It's not the all refugees. Rather, I think it has to be dealt with case by case.
Yes, thank you. See, we have in the modern world, we have the habit of living in binaries, yes or no. But there are no binaries can be applied on this case because both you cannot say that the refugees are contributing to terrorism. They are the contributor to the contrary. But when we see the recent phenomena of Rohingyas, we are finding they involved in terrorism. So there are a gradation in this problem. So mostly we find that the cultural and religious understanding of the migrants who seeks the refuge in the host nation are more responsible for the problems or the contributors in the host countries, and where our faith says that the entire creation is nothing but the manifestation of the same consciousness. If we believe, then we cannot contribute to the terrorism anywhere in the world, wherever we are. But the contrary to that is the Semitic understanding. They differentiate between followers to followers and to improvise their status they may involved in this act. So that is maybe the case. So we need to dwell. So the Sushilji, another, I think we have some more 10 minutes. So another two questions we'll take now. For Sushilji, the question is the developing nations are suffering from refugee issue, or developed countries are also suffering from the refugee issue? And the second one is India on the path of another partition due to refugees? You are unmute, Sushil.
Very interesting questions. Developing nations and developed nations, obviously when refugees want to flee for their lives, they look for the first available lifeline that they can get. In fact, the definition of refugees under UN Charter are those who cross the international border. So, nations which are adjacent to their own country become the first stop for refugees. Unless you are trying to catch hold of the wheel of an aircraft ready to take off, you are generally headed towards a neighboring country. And if a refugee had a choice, they would certainly look for a developed country, because developed countries have better infrastructure and probably promise of a better life. And between the two, they might, chances are, choose. But very often, such choices are not available. And those who are professional refugees, those who are ideological refugees, those who like to be called refugees, whether they are refugees or not, they have almost a route plan mapped in their head as to where they must go. Irrespective of how far that land is and how difficult that journey may be, they are willing to risk their lives, drown in the seas, freeze in the trucks, die of bullets or dehydration, but they definitely know where they are headed. So this may be subject matter of a different study. I don't think the context in which we are discussing refugees, this is a relevant issue, that whether refugees lead to terrorism or not. The second issue you asked was whether India is heading for another partition because of refugees. I don't think India is heading for partition because of refugees. India is heading for partition because of our leadership. Because those who give us gyan, that we have a common DNA, those who give us gyan, that a difference in the method of worship is immaterial. Those who give us gyan that it is vipreet to their mool pravrti to reclaim their usurped temples. Those who give us gyan that we should not look for a shivling in Gyanvapi mosque, they are responsible if we go for another partition, if we make an abject surrender and look helplessly our motherland being vivisected all over again. Please do not hunt for other alibis or other pretexts or other prevarications, other lies. It is this hypocrisy that will lead to another partition and nothing else.
Yeah, thank you. We have people from Ukraine also. Our Karyakartas have joined. Suryamani ji, thank you. Joining from Ukraine. They are really supporting the Ukrainian refugees who are coming to other part under the international Seva International. Thank you, Maniji. You can take, Sushil ji, one more question. Is it
Please.
not that some religion teach terror first and try to claim their member by terror to create their group and influence the land?
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. The theology, the ideology, the belief system, the faith that you are the superior most thought, the superior most theology, the superior most religion, the superior most faith, and everybody else has to be subservient to you, has no right to exist. It is this mindset that creates violence, that creates terror, that legitimizes terror. Because only through terror you can subjugate others, not through facts, not through reason, not through debate, not through the idea of coexistence. Refugees is a symptom. They create refugees. But refugee is not the disease. Refugee is a manifestation of such hate, of such violence, of such supremacist mindset. So if we commit the blunder of considering a symptom, a manifestation as the disease, as the root, then we are doomed from the very first step. I hope I have been able to answer your question.
Yes. Thank you. Another one or two questions we will take before winding up, and I'll give another 2-3 minutes to each speaker to consolidate their topic. So one more question, we'll give it to Gobardhan Das ji. Do you have instances in history where nations have broken because of refugees? And is India too been a victim of refugee? Gobardhan Das ji, you are unmute, please. You are muted.
Well, in first question, whether there is whether any instance there are any countries that divided because of refugees. If you look at, once again, if I go back to the Parashya, that's because of the Parashya, Parsis are refugees, but at the same time, if you look at the history, the Parashya, the country, was invaded by refugees itself. So because of they are being, original Parsis are being exiled. So there are examples, yes. And second question was whether India is, what is the second question was?
India is a victim of refugee.
India is a victim of refugee. India is a land where they accepted refugees from all over the worlds probably. And this is from the history, it's a long history. So once again, depends on the type of refugees we are talking about. The refugees from Parashya, refugees from Bangladesh, the origins actually contributing for the growth of the country. On the other hand, the refugees like Rohingyas, they are, of course, we are the victims, basically because of these refugees. They are coming as refugees, but later on they behave like they are invaders. So, of course, it is depends on what kind of refugees we are talking about and the origin of the refugees we are talking about.
Okay, I think we will, at the end of our session, we are completing almost 80 minutes. But as we all know, now we must have made up of our, based on the discussion, that it is not the refugee per se create the problem, but it is the baggages with which refugees travel to the host nation create the problem. And recently, there are two set of refugees or migrants which we are seeing. One who has moved from the Iraq, Syria to the Western countries, and another set of migrants from Ukraine is moving to European countries. We are finding that European countries are more comfortable in receiving the migrants from the Ukraine, but equally are not so comfortable to receive the migrants from the Iraq and Syria. This talks about this whole the phenomena which is there in front of us, talks about the reality there behind the issue of the refugee. Before we conclude, I'll just give 2 minutes each to our speakers to consolidate their thoughts, and then we will close the session. Shri Sushil ji first.
Thank you so much. I think one point that has emerged from this conversation so far is we mistake demographic invasion as some kind of a refugee influx. We have to be very careful about who we call a refugee and who we term as a refugee. There is something called demographic invasion, make no mistake. And that demographic invasion is happening today as we speak. Otherwise, what was the need for Rohingyas to come more than 3,000 kilometers away, crossing a country and 10 states into Kashmir, that too near LOC, and that too with the connivance of the state government and the central government? This is nothing short of high treason, and those who committed it should be tried in a court of law. But we don't see that happen because they were complicit in it. And the government of the day agrees with them because they have done nothing in the last 8 years to move them from these sensitive geographies. They are not refugees, they are demographic invaders. Just as there is a demographic invasion in Assam, there is a demographic invasion in West Bengal, there is a demographic invasion in our cities from Bangladesh. Likewise, there is a demographic invasion of Europe. And it is very well planned. Because the term refugee comes handy and it invokes sympathy, it invokes larger, bigger human sensibilities, it becomes convenient cover for a demographic invasion. So we must learn to distinguish between a genuine refugee who's fleeing for his life and a demographic invasion which is systematic with the connivance of political leadership within the country, traffickers within the country. There is an entire economy of traffickers that enables it. They are no refugees. This is plain and simple demographic invasion. Our security doctrines have failed to list it. Only a few months back, General Bipin Rawat, for the first time, officially from his mouth said, Indian army is capable of fighting at 2.5 fronts. That half front was a demographic invasion of India and an enemy sitting within. But till date, there is no security doctrine saying our demography is in peril. That demography is the source of insecurity. And that creates destabilization. We are yet to acknowledge it because we are wedded to hypocrisy at the very top. Our leadership, social leadership, political leadership, strategic leadership is hypocritical. पाखंड है जो हमें इस सत्य को स्वीकारने से रोकता है। हम देखते हुए भी आंखें मीचते हैं। तो कृपया इन्हें शरणार्थी न कहें। ये जनसंख्यिकी का एक आक्रमण है और जनसंख्या के संतुलन को बिगाड़कर हमारी स्थायित्व को, हमारी स्थिरता को, हमारी सुरक्षा को खतरा पैदा करने का एक सुनियोजित षड्यंत्र है और उसको उसी नाम से पुकारना चाहिए। रोहिंग्या इस देश में शरणार्थी नहीं है। रोहिंग्या इस देश में षड्यंत्र का एक भाग है। धन्यवाद।
Thank you, ji, Sushil ji. So, Gobardhan Das ji, another 1 minute for you to wrap up your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. Today I have learned a lot of things. In fact, Sushil ji, I agree almost all of the points he made. The terrorism, refugee, and invaders are all very concomitant words, and some of the refugees who come flee for saving their lives in host land, like in India, they are contributing to the growth of the homeland. to the adopted land. However, some of the refugees like Rohingyas, they come in this country or in from other countries to for example, in Germany. Although they enter as refugees, but they become the invaders. Basically, once again, Sushilji took the example of Bengal and so took the example of Kashmir. They're very true. These are although they are initially they look like the refugees. They try to get attention of the politicians. And then at the end, they are the one they becomes invader, and they displace the native citizens. Like in Bengal, what is happening now today is the native Bengalis are being slowly displaced, and they are looking for the job to other countries and other states. But that place is being taken up by the so-called the refugees, and ultimately they become invaders. They are the one causing all troubles. So basically, once again, I would like to say it depends on the type of the refugees are coming from. Either they contribute to your country, or some refugees, although they are entered, they take out your land, they take out your heritage. So basically, we have to distinguish between the contributors, real refugees, and the intentionally called refugees but turned the invaders. So that is all I have to say. That is all I would like to emphasize. And
Okay,
thank you for calling me for such a wonderful platform to talk about the thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you, Gobardhan Dasji. We are coming to an end of the session. So before we end, I would like to invite Narendra Negandhi ji, the treasurer of Vishwadhan Kendra, to express the vote of thanks. Shri Narendra ji.
Scott, first of all, I'm a very small man compared to what, Sushilji has been able to achieve, or rather, has been able to explain all this. So in case, I am not able to express myself fully, please excuse me. सुशील जी, आपने जो बताया कि the basic difference between the demographic invasion and the refugee, really most guys we have seen are making that mistake. And यहाँ पे तो ऐसा planned invasion है जो इतने सालों से चले आ रहा है with the connivance of the central government, state government, etc. और because of that जो problems create हो रहे हैं उसे खत्म करने की जो ताकत नहीं दिख रही है. But more than that, like as you rightly said right in the beginning, that the judge, if he can pass such a remark, I had a very simple question to ask him, whether he will say exactly the same thing for Gujarat riots which started because of the Godhra thing. That means Gujarat riot, nobody need to be punished. It is the guys who created the problem at Godhra were the guilty ones, and hence they should be punished. And for Gujarat, everybody should be released. If that judge was available at that point of time on the Supreme Court bench, would he talk like that? As of today, I believe it's the collegium who should be apologizing to the country for bringing this kind of judges on the bench. And unfortunately, now we hear that there is one more in Maharashtra. One more beheading of a chemist is done. What's this going on? And these judges are talking like this. We knew judiciary is a failure in India, but these two judges, particularly the so-called Lord Suryakant, has shamed India.
think
Nothing less than. Okay, now I come back to the subject. I'm sorry, I expressed myself. Sushil ji and Gobardhan Das ji, thank you very much for attending this lecture series and giving us a very we started thinking more and more. Like I used to be in Sudan quite often, and I used to see a lot of guys were shifting from North Sudan to South Sudan, South Sudan to North Sudan, depending on and purely based on the religion. Here I am seeing exactly same thing going on, and the way Sudan separated into two separate countries. Here, the invasion which is going on. So when Sushilji, you started saying demographic invasion, we see that in Mumbai, starting from small buildings, in the societies, one after the other, things are happening. People, one group of people will move in, and because of that, the Hindus start moving out, because then the buildings felt unsafe or unsellable, either way. वही तरह से जो यहाँ पे छोटे छोटे सिटीज में चल रहा है, मैं बम्बई की बात की, छोटे सिटीज में जो चल रही है वो सब अभी मैं डिटेल में देख रहा हूँ. आपने जो बताया कि जो डेमोग्राफिक इन्वेजन, ये धीरे 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 अभी आपके ज्यादा डिटेल्स में मैं सोच रहा हूँ जब आप बोल रहे थे तभी. सो फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल थैंक यू वेरी मच फॉर ओपनिंग आवर आइज. ओके, we can understand the anger. I could feel the anger that you expressed while speaking. And I also feel guilty personally that when these things were going on, we did nothing. Okay, government did nothing, but what did we do? I believe we, the silent guys, are also equally guilty. And I can understand the frustration that you face. Same frustration has been faced by a lot of other people. Gobardhan Das ji, आपने जो बताया कि from Bangladesh to move to India and then trying to settle. Okay, we appreciate the efforts that you and your family has put in to really achieve at a particular status and the level. Okay, I would just say thank you to both of you for opening our eyes on this subject. I would also, would like to thank Dr. Sakti, who unfortunately today could not be here. And at the same time, I would also like to thank Shri Mishra ji, who in the previous lecture, okay, explained us the psychological aspects of the refugees. Once again, nothing much to say. Thank you very much for enlightening us in this beautiful program. Thank you.
Okay, thank you everybody. We will conclude this session. Thank you very much.
Namaskar. Thank you both, all of you.
Namaskar. बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद.
Namaste ji, namaste. Thank you.
Namaste.